Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock-flavoured podcast. On this show, I'm welcoming back to Derry Toms one of our favourite people, Allister Thompson, to talk about his new novel, Birch and Jay, The Knowledge Seekers, Book 1, and his influences and ideas around writing about climate apocalypse, its aftermath, and why hopeful post-apocalyptic fiction is his kind of tonic. Regular listeners will know Allister already, as he's been a semi-regular co-host, but he's a writer, musician and editor, and his first novel, The Music of the Spheres, has been out a few years now, and we've discussed it here on Breakfast in the Ruins, so check that out too. Along the way, we get into all sorts of things, as always, including more War of the Worlds chat, and why he chose to set his death camp in Bradford. Okay, it's Bradford, Ontario, but still, come on mate. So wind up that old record player and spin the old Barclay James Harvest album you found in the tunnels under the collapsed bunker. Find it skips too much, give it up as a bad job, and then join us as we talk about Birch and Jay. We're back in Derry Toms, and welcome back to Derry Toms, Allister Thompson, musician, author, the man behind Gateless Gate, Carn Tengri, Sons of Birches, and a whole host of other musical identities. Welcome back to Derry Toms, lovely to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here, Andy, as always.
And we were just talking before we started recording, we'd peaked too early. I was just pouring myself, what have I got? I've got a Smuggler's Trail and Kirksall Brewery Canal Chase IPA. I don't normally go for IPAs. I find them a little bit bitter these days.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, it's a Sunday evening. So whereas it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon for you, or shortly after, over there in Ontario.
I have my fair trade dark roast with some sort of fake Baileys in it.
That does sound quite delicious, to be fair.
Oh, it's lovely. It's lovely.
Now, it's probably been about 18 months. I think it was July 2024. I was looking back earlier because we were talking about, did we use Zoom or did we use Riverside last time we recorded? And I was looking back through recordings, and I don't think we've recorded together since July 2024. It doesn't seem that long.
It's a shame, though. We should really, you should have me on more often. I'm very entertaining. So.
Well, and also, we've talked about all those crap prog albums that we've bought, because I sent you a picture. I bought the L. Ron Hubbard and Edgar Winter Mission Earth prog album. So we're going to do a prog album episode at some point. And I also got the Eric Von Daniken prog album.
I think, isn't Bill Bruford on there or something?
Yeah. I got that in a tat shop on Anglesey, of all places.
I don't own that one. I've heard it. It's terrible.
Yes, it's awful.
But there are good ones amongst those concept albums, like the Mandela Band, Eye of Wendor is really good. If you like things that, if you don't mind a little cheesy, because Barclay James Harvest is on there.
Yeah.
And of course there's good old Jeff Wayne. So.
And a while back, of course, I think it was on your recommendation, I got that Italian prog album with the seagull with rockets on the cover.
Oh, right. Alpha Taurus. Yes.
Alpha Taurus, yeah. Pick that up as well. That's quite entertaining, though.
Yeah,
that's actually quite an enjoyable album, yeah. But we're not here to talk about prog rock, weird prog rock albums today. We're here to talk about, well, post-apocalyptic fiction, and, in particular, your recent novel, Birch and Jay.
Indeed.
The Knowledge Seekers Book 1, which I have in my hand right here. There's a bit of a story behind this as well, isn't there? Because I pre-ordered this from the online place, and it never did arrive. And I checked today, and if you order it from the online place today, it comes from the online place USA. It's not managed to find its way into British online place for some reason, which is a bit of a bummer. But I did get a copy direct from you.
Yeah, it's a shame. But I'm assured that steps are being taken to rectify this in the future. So,
yeah, I hope so, because people should be able to get hold of this in the UK or Europe or wherever. So we talked about The Music of the Spheres, your first novel, probably 3 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago. It's quite a while ago now. And this is your second published novel. So let's just get right into it. What made you want to write a climate-based post-apocalyptic novel?
Well, as you'll remember, and maybe a couple of your listeners will remember, Music of the Spheres was something I wrote when I was young and sort of found in a box and spruced up and released a few years ago. And I'm also a professional book editor, so I sit around all day editing people's fiction. This is my job for almost 30 years. And at a certain point, you start to think, well, why am I not doing this too? I must have learned all these tricks. And the Music of the Spheres got a pretty decent reception from the people who have read it, and I thought, well, okay, maybe I can do this. But writing is difficult, and it's not like writing a song. Musicians will tell you it's hard to be a musician, but it's a hell of a lot harder to sit down and write 80,000 words. To have the discipline to sit down and do that, and the organization to outline a project, like it's not easy. So I needed a motivator, and so I thought, well, obviously I'm going to write speculative fiction. That's my interest. What is going to motivate me as a theme? And so I'm sure you can identify with this as well. We're in the same age demographic. If you came along, if you were an intelligent, sensitive kid in the late 80s, early 90s, and there was sort of a wave of environmentalism that came along then, right? Ozone layer needs to be fixed. We're going to recycle. Yes. Midnight oil is suddenly popular. And I was caught up in that. I was a very idealistic kid. And like all of us of that generation who became environmentalists, we've, taken steps in our lives to be environmental citizens, right? You've made changes in the way you live your life. You've made decisions. Meanwhile, the rest of the world goes from disaster to disaster, and it starts to be revealed the extent of global warming and climate change, which were sort of more rumors around, when we were kids. And now we understand the depth of destruction that humanity has visited upon the planet. So for me, the last, 35 years of my life have been, in that regard, depressing, because you just see us lurching towards the end. And so, there's a lot of talk about climate anxiety and climate grief amongst young people, amongst teens, and rightfully so. But if you're someone who was that idealistic, as I certainly was, we've had that our entire lives. And so I channeled all of that into sort of the grief and sorrow and anger that is expressed in Birch and Jay. Now, being an editor, I know that just writing some polemic screed is not going to win too many fans and not too many readers. So I've invested it with all the things, romance and adventure and what keeps the pages turning. But ultimately, it was born of this need to put down on record. Here I am. I'm not anybody, but I'm one of the people who understood this, and I'm expressing this. So you'll have noticed, we'll probably get to this, I guess, but there's a lot of sort of self-referential little tidbits in the novel about there's a musician whose CDs they find, and this musician was somebody who was writing about climate change 100 years before. Well, that's kind of how I envisioned this novel. Maybe somebody finds a dusty old copy in 100 years, and they read it, and they say, okay, well, here's some evidence amongst the other pieces of evidence that there were more enlightened people who understood what was being done to us, the people of the future. So that is how it came about.
Well, that's one of the key themes of the novel as well, isn't it? Not only like looking to the past, and I think Jay carries around that CD cover in his bag as well as a copy of Albert Camus's The Plague, but also the idea that the knowledge seekers are going out there to retain knowledge and to make sure that there's a knowledge base for future generations. So it's all a theme of the novel, isn't it?
It is.
It's funny though, because I think you mentioned people of our age. Oh, I mean, we were inundated with cultural touchstones when it came to worrying about the future and post-apocalyptic narratives and everything else, weren't we? Because, I mean, if you think about growing up in the 80s, what did we have? Well, nuclear holocaust fear.
Right.
Rabies was a massive thing. At one point, I can remember rabies posters everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, rabies posters, the AIDS panic in the early 80s, when everybody thought AIDS would destroy the world. Yes. And the TV adverts were all like giant tombstones. Like really kind of morbid advertisements on TV. I remember some of my old colleagues when I worked in a prison. They'd worked in the prison in the 1980s, and they said during the AIDS panic, they were all like, if they had a prisoner with AIDS in the prison, they all wore like full NBC suits to do anything with them, to have any kind of interaction with them. It's crazy, really. What else did we have? Killer bees.
Yeah.
Killer bee fears.
Pandemics were starting to be a concern. You had those, what were those movies? This is the 90s we're talking about now, but like what was the one with Dustin Hoffman as a scientist fighting an Ebola type plague?
God, yeah.
Yeah. So there was pandemic fear
outbreak.
As well. Yeah. So that stuff started to come along. Although
Yeah.
nuclear war was the big one, right? When you were going to write about an apocalypse from 1940 through 1990, and you were envisioning the worst thing that could happen to people, it was always going to be nuclear war, almost all the time.
Well, how old were you when Threads came out?
I believe 12, and I saw it... No, not 12. Yes, 12. And I saw it for the first time because I had a very enlightened history teacher who showed it to us in class, and he said, you can have a free period if you... This is very disturbing, but, I think you need to know about this.
Yeah.
You can leave the classroom if you want to, and some kids did. And I didn't. And I sat through that, and as I said to you privately, it changed my perception of something drastically. It was a perfect piece of art for that. And really, it's been very influential on me. So I'm glad that you mentioned it.
My parents wouldn't let us watch it. We weren't allowed to stay up. I mean, as a kid, I'm not even sure it was even on the TV, but it was probably on after we were allowed to stay up. And I don't think my mum would have had us watch that anyway. But very, very similarly, our English teacher put it on.
Right.
We had a double English lesson every week where it was, back-to-back English classes just to fit it all in. And you remember those old, huge... I don't know if you had them in Canada, but they would always wheel in an enormous television on like big chrome legs with casters and like doors on the front. They would open the doors and put on some crap or Look and Learn or something like that. And we sat and watched Threads in English.
Well, those were good teachers, though.
Yeah.
They trusted us to be able to parse what we were seeing. I think I don't think that's so common anymore in the educational system. We sort of bubble wrap the kids,
Certainly, that teacher would be reported now.
Probably,
and they would get into serious trouble. For traumatizing children. But it was a thing, wasn't it? And just up the road from us, in a village called Warne, we had the East Yorkshire nuclear bunker where an episode of Panorama was filmed in the early 80s. Which is hilarious.
There was one in my town. I live in a city of 50,000 people, and there's a bunker built in the side of the hill. There's one in Ottawa that they call the Deafin Bunker, named after the Prime Minister. But we have one here too, and unfortunately you can't go in and tour it. They sometimes film bad sci-fi movies in there, apparently. But in the side of the hill, and then going all the way, a kilometer or something under the military base on the top of the escarpment, is this place where they would send the politicians and the city leaders in the event of such an event.
Yeah.
So
I would put 10 quid on Bruce Campbell having filmed a straight-to-video movie down there. I'd put a tenner on it. So, we had all those touchstones, didn't we? And it's when you think about the whole post-apocalyptic fiction sphere, you kind of get two types, don't you, really? You get the cynical ones, where it's exploitative, and, I'm sure we've all watched our fair share of exploitative Mad Max rip-offs and Italian post-nuke Mad Max rip-offs and all that type of thing. And then you get, like, probably the more hopeful ones. And these different types of post-apocalyptic fiction. So, you've got your plague ones, like, I don't know, what would a plague one be? The Stand, something like that.
Right.
Which some people would consider hurtful because the hand of God saves the day at the end of the day. The literal hand of God comes down and swoops up the nuclear weapon. That, for me, means it's absolute bullshit. I read that book, all 8 bazillion pages of it, and got to that fucking conclusion and nearly threw it out the window. And then you get your... Sorry, go on.
I've got nothing against Stephen King, but I can't read something that length.
No.
I just can't devote a year of my life or something to that.
Yeah. Yep. I've got a very good friend who was a huge fan of Stephen King, but she told me about one of the concluding incidents in It as well. And having seen the TV shows at the time, this was before the new movies came out, I had no idea that this was a thing. He must have been coked out of his fucking brain when he wrote that book, because apparently there's one girl and all the boys, isn't there?
Yes.
And in order
I saw
to
the
gain
movie.
power, in the book, in order to gain power over It, they gangbang the girl.
It's of its time then, right? Isn't that what we say about everything that every time we see
Yeah.
something odious in an older book, we say, oh, it's a man of his time. Oh,
Ouch.
well,
Ouch.
oh, I'm glad
Holy
I'm
shit.
glad I haven't read that one.
Yeah, yeah. And then like you mentioned earlier that like, more younger people now. That's one of the funny things about climate fiction. I think for people of our generation, unless they are specifically thinking in that direction, I think post-apocalyptic climate fiction is a hard sell to a lot of people because for the simple why is it a hard sell? I've got my opinions on it. Because I think for our nukes, disease, even ecological catastrophe like the death of grass and things like that, people kind of bought into it.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One I noticed I mean, it's hard to get book reviews these days, but I have had a few, and some people aren't reacting too well to. I mean, I should actually qualify this because I want people to buy the book. No one's given it a negative review, but when they offer small qualifications, it's sort of like, this is heavy. This is really heavy. You should go into this knowing that you're going to be hit with this heavy topic.
Yeah.
And that leads into the second reason, which is with nuclear war, it's as long as we don't press the buttons, we're fine. Humans are in control of what happens.
Yeah.
What we all know, anybody who's educated about climate change now knows that the damage has, for the most part, been done, and we and coming generations are going to live through it. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do things to mitigate it or to fight it. But, this is something so large and overwhelming that you almost can't take it in. And one of the reasons why we're not doing very much about climate change as individuals and societies is we can't take in the scope of that. It's too big, it's too scary, and people just don't want to think about it, and they want to keep going on consuming and living their lives the way they always have, which is what people are doing. And so, something that's basically spanking you for your way of life and for having your head in the sand can be a hard sell. It tends to sell to the people who are already concerned about that. And that's kind of a drawback, right? Because I've written this thing to try to talk to people about this topic and to get them to think about it and talk about it. But if they're not willing to pick it up because of the theme, then we have a problem. And so there are examples of successful climate fiction right now because it is a big and growing subgenre, but it is something that a lot of people have emotional difficulty coming to terms with, and that's where the whole issue of hope enters the picture.
I think there's a number of prongs to this fork, isn't there? Because for Gen Z or whatever the kids call themselves these days, let's just call them the kids. I think it's less the case that they're more turned off by it because it's so much part of it is one of the cultural touchstones for them, because in the last 15, 20 years while they've been growing up, they've had social media, they've had all these other things, and they've got a much smarter handle on the climate change thing. But for older people and people like us, unless you had a specific interest in it, it's been in the public eye for so long, and we still to this day have people in power thinking that they're stating a brilliantly intellectual gotcha when they say, it's snowing in New York, so much for global warming.
Yeah, there's the deniers and then there's the minimizers. That's what I call your standard liberal type of government like Canada has, where they make performative steps, but at the same time they're propping up a huge and very dirty oil and gas industry, probably the world's dirtiest oil and gas industry because of the way the bitumen is extracted in Alberta. So we talk a certain talk, but on the other hand, we want to have a strong economy, right? So let's keep doing the dirty thing that's ruining everything, right? So and so that's when you get older, pragmatism creeps into your life, and that's a natural part of maturity. But sometimes we're in a situation societally where pragmatism is simply not the answer, and drastic steps are the answer. Younger people are far more likely to be open to the idea of that. Whether they will change and become more pragmatic and lose that idealism, as generations tend to do, we'll see. But certainly a younger person is more likely to be receptive to this message, and it's one of the reasons why the publisher of Birch and Jay decided that we would market it as young adult when it was written more as a for all ages type of thing by me, because the protagonists are young people, and if you are young, and the other thing is I think you're sort of hinting at this, but you can't bullshit young people. The intelligent young people. You couldn't bullshit young punks in 1977, and you can't bullshit kids now. You can't bullshit Greta Thunberg, for example. And so I was writing it, for them, because they're not going to get any bullshit out of my book. They're not going to get biodomes that are going to save us, that we can all go live in while the Venusian climate that we've created rages outside. It's all realism. It's what will actually happen, and what can you do, and what can you teach your children to do to move past this, outrageous, horrible history of industrialized humanity and what it's wreaked upon the earth.
I expect Venusian biodomes in your next book. I'm just going to point that out.
Well, I do have a couple of, more standard sci-fi premises that I've started writing, so I think you'll enjoy them.
Good. It's a weird one. I think ecological catastrophe novels for a lot of people are a hard sell because it does put the onus more on the reader to think really long and hard and deep, because you're right, the nuclear war novel, nuclear apocalypse, somebody has to press the button.
Right.
Whereas with this, omission of action doesn't save the world. Omission of action and doing nothing just inevitably makes it doubly likely to happen. So it confronts everybody who's reading this book when they read about it. And the fascinating thing about your book as well is how geographically tied it is to your region.
Right.
It's a travelogue of the Ontario area in places. So the fact that you're thinking long and hard and deep about the effects of this climate catastrophe and what kind of effect it would have over time, what kind of effect it would have in a societal perspective in terms of breakdown of government, breakdown of order, breakdown of ethics and morals, and treatment of people. It's all there. It's all laid out. How much kind of time did you spend wargaming that in your head and mapping it all out, or did it just come really easily?
Well, you definitely hit on what is actually the point of the novel. The climate change is more of the backdrop. So in answer to the earlier part of that question, I moved up from Toronto, the biggest city in Canada, which everyone believes is a sophisticated place, about 10 years ago, to a place called North Bay, which is 400 kilometers north. And I'm I don't have a lot of social life in this community, but I'm definitely anchored here now. This is where I'm staying. I love the woodlands. I love being close to nature. And so another motivator for me when I was cooking up this concept was, okay, writing what you know is really helpful, especially when you haven't written something in a long time. And this is an area that doesn't get written about a lot. So I know these places intimately. It takes place down at the major highway of Ontario between Toronto and North Bay. Well, I've been up and down that a zillion times, and I know all these little towns. And it enabled me to bring those places to life. But think, what will they be like dead? That's that is a thing that people enjoy these days. That's sort of envisioning a post-apocalyptic world. We've all seen the art that people create.
Yeah.
And in terms of the sort of the sociology and the politics, really the point of this novel, and particularly the sequel that I finished writing, it's not so much about climate change or what are the models going to predict for a particular area. It's we extrapolate in this book. If people continue to be the way they are now, if they continue to vote in the governments they vote now, if they continue to have the same attitudes towards other people they have now, what will the world look like as things really start to break down? And it does not look good. It's not a pretty picture at all. The inherent selfishness of people in a consumerist society, as well as their fear for the safety of their family and friends, which is a natural instinct, is going to cause us to put empathy to the side in a way that might shock us, like you might have seen in 1930s Germany, or you see in Australia where they keep migrants, in camps on islands, or in Europe and Greece and in Italy, places like that. This is already happening, and not all of these people are climate refugees, of course, but there will be millions upon millions of climate refugees, and all signs point to a complete and total lack of empathy in our response. And I don't believe that governments are going to be equipped to handle that. I don't think they're going to want to handle that, and so that was really, that was the anchor driving this when I wrote it. I wanted to be very realistic about that.
It's incredible, really. I mean, we've said this a lot with the Moorcock fiction that we've covered. We've said it when we covered William Hope Hodgson. It doesn't matter what kind of fiction you're writing, I don't think. If you're writing anything which has any kind of real-world analogue, and it's about how shit the world is at getting its shit together, for want of a better expression, every 2 months, or sometimes every 2 weeks, or sometimes every 2 days that go by, it gets more and more relevant, because when you started writing this, there probably weren't ICE detention camps in the United States.
We were between Trump terms at that time.
Yeah. You know, we said earlier on that nuclear war, apocalypse fiction was something which very much, you know, dominated our minds in the 80s. I'm funny enough talking about this with Malcolm Craig just a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about Twilight 2000 and things like that. But we're now suddenly in a massive conflagration in the Middle East as of 7 days ago when this was being recorded. And we have the American Secretary of Defense, who's redubbed himself the Secretary of War, bragging in press briefings that they are raining death from the skies and the Iranians are evil and they will continue to punch while the Iranians are down. And it's absolutely fucking mind-boggling. If you think just a year ago that we would be here.
That is the interesting thing.
This whole idea, you know.
That's the interesting thing about writing a book of that kind in 2023 and having it come out in 2025 is by the time the book came out, all these things were starting to come true. They're in the book. And I'm not claiming I'm a prophet or a seer. There are many people like me who could see this happening.
If it sells more books, say it.
Yeah. And so I've written the sequel, and the sequel really makes clear because there are flashback segments in the sequel to 2055, whatever. So you can see it happening. And I mean, think about the world. I mean, yes, there's little flashes of hope every time a socialist government gets elected here or there, but ultimately we're being led by the nose to the far right at a time when we need the opposite. And it couldn't be clearer. And like you say, when you have things like the Trump administration, you have Putin, you have the behavior of the Chinese government, all of these different new authoritarian poles of power. You never know what shit they're going to pull. Yeah. And they're going to pull all that shit. And meanwhile, ignoring the actual problem that we all have, the existential problem. Yeah.
It's everywhere. News this morning, Metropolitan Police raid the Quakers Club in London to arrest people for planning to protest.
Oh, my family members and I, we're British by origin, and I was born there. We cannot believe that there are laws against protesting peacefully in the UK, and there are.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. We're in this bizarre world where the BBC edit out someone shouting "Justice for Palestine" from a TV broadcast, but fail to edit out someone with Tourette's shouting the N-word at two people receiving wards.
I read The Guardian, so I saw that, yeah.
Fucking mental, mate.
Yeah.
Absolutely mental where we find ourselves now. And but anyway, let's talk about Birch and Jay anyway, because we're kind of dancing around the subject, aren't we? We're talking post-apocalyptic stuff, more generally. And I know there's a couple of things that inevitably we'll end up talking about, because I think when we were just messaging about this, we'd mention Threads, but also things like The Road. So, before we get into it, one of the questions I was going to say, what were your cultural touchstones, when it came to thinking about writing this, and the things that even subconsciously would have influenced you writing a story like this?
Well, there was a very conscious influence, actually, on the way that I wrote this, meaning the sort of more measured tone and avoiding, the most overt, lurid violence, which was important to me. And this is almost a hackneyed thing to say now, but Ursula K. Le Guin was the big influence on this novel. Yeah. She's having a big, moment with all the hyper woke people on the internet quoting her endlessly, and she's a feminist icon, which I'm sure she'd appreciate if she were alive. But I am genuinely a massive fan, and she was hugely influential, and for that reason, that her books are intelligent, measured, thoughtful. You get to the end of 300 pages, and hardly anything has happened in terms of violence and adventure, but you just feel like you've eaten a big feast. Mm-hmm. It's just, and she was also just an incredible prose stylist. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to approach it in a way that was very thoughtful, and so I wouldn't say that any of her works influenced what I'm talking about, other than we share the same humanist principles. Yeah. And it wasn't so much about other similar touchstones. More, it was about authors that had influenced me. So. You know that Moorcock was the overriding influence on the music of the Spheres. That was painfully obvious. But in the way, you may have noticed in the way that some of the characters talk, like I didn't try to think about new ways of talking or new jargon or, go like Anthony Burgess on this. It was, I was very influenced by Ray Bradbury as a young person. And that sort of like Midwestern charm that some of his characters have, I've imbued into some of the elderly characters in this novel, particularly the character named Elm. I feel she could kind of step right out of dandelion wine or something like that.
Yeah.
So those, it's more about the way people write that influenced me. Now, I had, of course, read The Road and read other post-apocalyptic books, but because the motivator for this was really talking about climate change and talking about, the degradation of civil society, I was really following my own star on that one. But there's always people behind you that you've read that influenced you, and including the likes of Moorcock. He's hopefully someday we get to talk about the Nomad of the Time Streams a bit, because those books changed my life. And no, you're not going to read Birch and Jay and see that in this, but I wouldn't have written it without having been influenced by those.
It does come across that you're making I think it comes across as very natural, but also I think I'm someone who's I enjoyed The Road for the content. I can't say it's a book I'd read again, because the overwhelming nihilism of it all is quite oppressive. But I was glad to pick it up and not end up feeling like I'm reading Ridley Walker or something, So yeah, I think the Ursula K. Le Guin and Ray Bradbury kind of style of writing, I think, fits this kind of thing anyway. So I mean, you've set it up with a retrospective framing device as well. You've got your two first-person narratives, which are Jay and Birch. Was that always the intention, or did you ever have like a draft with a straight chronological approach to it, or was that always the intention?
Well, I outlined it extensively, which is something I advise my editorial clients to do, because a surprising amount of people don't do that and they get bogged down. It was definitely going to be Jay as the proxy, the male character as the proxy for me.
Yeah.
As I outlined, I realized, you realize that you can show more if you add in a second POV. Yeah. And I really fell in love with the character of Birch, and I fell in love with them being in love. I have to admit, I'm a bit of a romantic at heart. And so that just, it allowed me to show more, and it allowed me to introduce the device of one of them chasing the other one, down the road to catch up with them. And the device of sort of it being retrospective. And that's another interesting thing that's happened. Again, people have been positive in the reviews, but a couple of people have been sort of like, you should all know that you know that these characters are going to be fine because he tells you right off the bat. And they say that as though they've never seen this before. And yet it's not uncommon. It doesn't have to be an element of suspense, like, oh, are Jay and Birch going to make it through? Like, that's not required to turn the pages of a novel. Yeah. So I've been a bit surprised that people have found that unusual. But it allows you to create almost an atmosphere of oral history being transmitted, almost a mythological or legendary sense. And so imagining them as older people, imparting this orally to younger people, that was really appealing to me. And if it gives away, if it's a spoiler that, they're going to make it to the end, well, so be it. That's not what this is about. It's not a suspense novel.
Yeah. Well, also, even if you didn't have those bits, they're point of view narrations. They're point of view first-person narrations, aren't they?
Precisely.
So unless you're going to get a Lovecraft style, oh no, it's knocking at the door, I should
have done that. I should have put an eldritch horror in there. Just when you think he's gonna be okay, there it is, looming dark, and he can't quite glimpse it. Yeah, because you never can. But
it's at the door, it's at the window, but still, I am typing. I am still typing away.
Oh, it was a congeries of eyes.
Of course, we're talking about this. You wrote it, I've read it, so we're talking about this with foreknowledge. But this is a podcast, so people are going to be wondering who the fuck is Jay and who the fuck is Birch. So give us the elevator pitch version of what this book is about.
In 2123, a place called Nor Bay is a utopian, idealistic community founded upon the ruins of the city of North Bay, Ontario. About 60 years since complete climate collapse, the collapse of society. There is no such thing as the Canadian state anymore, or any other state as far as the characters know. And in Nor Bay, there is a guild called the Knowledge Seekers, which is based at the old university, and they send missions around the province to look for knowledge and artifacts that may benefit people of the future, and they are going to sort through it and decide what is benign and what is the kind of technology and knowledge that has caused the harm that we're in. So we're talking about like medical knowledge and things like that. And the reason the community has this guild is it was founded by people who basically were released from death camps when the government finally collapsed decades before. And those are the elders that founded the community. They decided they needed a new way of living where we actually heed the mistakes of the past and don't repeat them. So the premise is Jay is a bushy-tailed young knowledge seeker at the age of 20, being sent out on his first solo mission. And Birch is his girlfriend / promised, we call in the novel. Once out on the road, they will meet with adventures and dangers, including, I might as well give a little bit of this away because it does come up pretty quickly in the plot. The antagonists are people who have the opposite viewpoint of the people of Norbay. They admire the past, they long for the past, and they want to resuscitate the older industrialized world. They dream of doing it, even though that's probably impossible, but they dream of doing that, and they also dream of expanding the territory of their city-state, which is centered in, of course, the big bad city of Toronto, where I spent most of my life, actually.
Yeah. The Council of the Six. Oh, knobheads. Don't like them at all. Don't like them at all, Alistair.
I got a good response to them, though, because I attempted to be a little bit nuanced. I gave my characters room to sort of think, could these people be right? Could the way I've been raised be wrong? And no, we are right in the end. But I gave him that moment of pause. And some of the people on that council are clearly not quite as radical as the others. And, I'm trying to be nuanced in my approach.
Yeah, you've got the Council 6 and you have the aggressive zealots. Right. And you have the more measured ones, but they're all still basically in thrall to the same idea, which is restore the old world and retain power of it, and their methods are deeply unpleasant.
Isn't that really what everything always comes down to in the end?
Absolutely.
It's power, seeking power.
It's always Animal Farm, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's always Animal Farm. Yeah, I love the idea of the knowledge seekers, people who travel through the ruins collecting knowledge. There's like sort of almost a monastic element to it, which is really cool. But there's this building sense of menace as the narrative drops in these hints about the past, like, the cataclysmic climate collapse, the political breakdown and the subsequent disease and brutality and all the other, to be fair, the good stuff we expect, from an exploitative perspective whenever you read this kind of fiction.
Well, exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Of course, shamelessly.
Yeah, absolutely. So. But it's I have to say, when the kick into gear, when Jay and his wise old guide cum companion Elm, who you've mentioned, the side characters of this are really good, by the way. I like Granite, I like Elm.
Thank you.
And she takes him to the migrant death camp that she spent time in as a child. And it's in Bradford. Now, I know it's Bradford, Ontario, right? But here am I, sitting in Bradford, and the most appalling bit of exposition about how bad things got, it happened in Bradford.
It's a very different place, I can tell you that.
I'm sure it is. But yeah, it was, it's good stuff. And when you've specifically considered young adults as an audience for this, how did you judge how dark and nasty to make it? Because there is a smidgen of threatened sexual violence at one point. It doesn't go anywhere. Nothing's articulated. And it's very satisfying, of course, that the chief source of that threat gets his head exploded like a pumpkin. But... Yeah, well, almost a cheer out loud moment.
Well, one thing that is true, and I've been editing young adult fiction since the late 90s. Back when I started, young adult fiction was written by adults so to teach kids lessons, and they're very, very educationally oriented a lot of the time, and you couldn't even have the F word in them. Things have radically changed. If you look at a horrifying concept like The Hunger Games, which was a young adult book, and think about what they're doing to each other in that. Kids are a lot more sophisticated than they used to be, unfortunately, in some ways, because they've had to witness horrible things online, and they're simply used to seeing things. Having said that, I did hold back on some of the violence out of personal scruples, but also considering the audience. But remember, I didn't write it to be a young adult novel. I wrote it to be for all ages. Now, I did consider that I would like teens to read it, but I was at a library conference recently handing out free copies, and people would say, well, I'm from such and such school. What kind of kids can read this? And I have to say, well, this is for kids who are mature readers, because there's, $10 words cropping up here and there, 10 quid words for you. And, there's some adult concepts like, yes, the hint that of sexual slavery could exist, because I had to show that in a complete breakdown, there are going to be people who are reduced to that. I'm not going to call it an animalistic level, because animals are far more noble than that. But, the lowest of humanity, there will be people reduced to that. And so you have to show that. You have to be willing to put that in there. But if, a teen of today needs to confront these realities. It's just, they don't. You shouldn't necessarily force them to see everything in lurid graphic detail the way they would in, frankly, a lot of the movies and TV shows they see now. I don't approve of that. I was one of the people who, that's not for teens specifically, but they watched it. I was one of the people who couldn't make it too many seasons into Game of Thrones because I felt they were deliberately shoving that content in our face. The extreme violence, the rape and all of that. And I mean, I would never read a book by that guy. If that is true to his books, I would never read that. There needs to be a point. To me, sexuality even, and especially sexual violence and violence in general, needs to have a point, even if it's in something pulpy.
Yeah.
You still need to have a point for why you do something. But that's just my perspective. That's why I approached it that way.
Yeah, Game of Thrones is a really interesting case. Because, I mean, it's a long... I read the Game of Thrones novels years and years and years ago. And really, I won't forgive George R.R. Martin for... I think the last novel was Dance of Dragons, and I spent like a week's holiday in France ploughing my way through that book, and you know what? It just introduces a million new characters, and it doesn't really progress things very much. Most of these characters were left out of the TV show. But one problem that the TV show really, really had was the two guys who made that, Weiss and Benioff, the two Davids. They appear to have made a very, very active decision. And that active decision was very, very unsavoury. Because the George R.R. Martin books are set in... I mean, it's basically a fantasy version of medieval War of the Roses England.
It's about politics.
Yeah, so you're going to have elements of that. But they introduce things into it that weren't in the book. And the very worst scenes of sexual violence in the series didn't take place in the books.
Okay, well, so, I apologise, George R.R.,
don't get me wrong, there is still some choice stuff in the books, but the choice to make it forefront and personal in the series was very much a decision that they made. So, before we carry on, just a couple of examples of that. King Joffrey with a prostitute shooting her in the private parts with a crossbow, not in the book.
I see.
King Robert's wife being present at the Red Wedding, pregnant, and getting stabbed in her pregnant belly repeatedly. She's not even there in the book.
Okay.
She's not even present at the Red Wedding. Later on, there was a lot of outcry because one of the Stark daughters, Sansa, gets raped by...
Oh, yes, that's where I stopped.
By the Bolton boy. Yeah. Doesn't happen in the book.
I see.
Doesn't happen in the book.
I mean, I want to qualify that, content of this kind doesn't disturb me as an editor or a reader. I mean, if you look at the Elric books, granted, gallop along at a particular pace, so you don't actually see very much. But it's part of Elric's moral journey, right? From this amoral society, or a society that doesn't have the same morals as us. The people of Melniboné don't have our morals, and so cruelty is natural to them, and they don't understand why we have these scruples. But that's interesting, right? That's an interesting approach. He's discussed. The whole thing is a discussion of morality. So, in content like, or say, Ian Banks sometimes has some pretty crazy, violent stuff in there, but for some reason, it seems to fit into the flow of the narrative and the ideas. So, I don't want to paint myself as some sort of Victorian prude here, but in my work, when I approach it in my work, I approach it I write what I would want to see. We all do, right? Yeah.
It's one of those things, isn't it? I have got more prudish as I've got older, I think. I don't think I'm a prude, but I have got more prudish. But I think that prudery, if that's even the right word, you're an editor, is prudery a word? I'm going to use it anyway.
Why not?
That prudery is more around, I can accept that something is an element of a story because we know that the Grand Britannians are sexual deviants and they crucify children. We know that because of the way the books are written and because it tells us. But what we don't get is lascivious scenes with protracted periods of rape, threat, then rape, or protracted scenes of torture, unless it's Hawkmoon himself, of course, and he's fair game, or, protracted scenes of a child being crucified, or a whole village full of people being stripped naked, sexually violated, and piled up in a heap dead. We know that the Grand Britannians did these things, but Moorcock captures that stuff with 2 or 3 sentences.
We don't need to, and it's the same with film and television now. We don't need to be subjected to these things.
Yeah, and there's also, I'm very strongly of the opinion that don't introduce something like that because it's that there's a really unfortunate habit with some television and some adaptations, and you'll know which one I'm talking about in a moment, where in order to make it more appealing to a modern audience, let's introduce something unsavoury, you know? So a great example is the BBC War of the Worlds adaptation.
Oh, man.
Which I happen to know that you rewatched recently.
Well, I bought it, right? Because when we were going to talk about it, I couldn't stream it anywhere, so I had to buy it. And so I thought, I'm going to get some use out of this. I'm going to watch it again.
Yeah.
And it was 50% worse the second time.
Yeah.
It's just terrible. Everything about it is terrible.
I've never been able to make myself watch it, but I remember the most liked tweet I ever tweeted when I was still on Twitter by something like 800% was I put a tweet on there and it was something like BBC Writers' Room, how do we make War of the Worlds better than H.G. Wells' original idea? BBC writer, rape threat? ? And that tweet ended up getting about 500 likes. And I don't think I'd ever had a tweet that had ever got more than 40. So obviously there were a lot of people that shared that opinion. But those post-Martian apocalypse scenes in the future, my God, fucking garbage.
Well, and just filmed it like I don't know, they put a red curtain up somewhere. I mean, it just like even the production values were bad. I mean, I could talk for an hour about everything that was wrong with that show. But
mate, you know what? I mean, we could talk for 10 minutes about it, but I don't think we've got an hour, and I'm not sure we could do a whole hour's podcast on the BBC War of the Worlds. Maybe we should, but Jesus, that fucking programme, and yeah, Hair in the Future with Tanya Tim. Oh my God, it was awful.
And just the deliberate insertion of principles, that expression of principles that I agree with, but in such clumsy ways. Like they're trapped in a building by three-legged Martians, and the character George decides to take that moment to bellow loudly about British colonialism to his brother, have a fight about it. This is the same thing we did to the Indian. Like, this is the time and place for that? Yeah. I mean, it's just so obvious. Just such bad writing.
But you know what? Now you've mentioned that again, it's making me want to hate watch it. Watch it for a second time, but just purely hate watch it.
You'll have a better time with that American one that we laughed at with C. Thomas Howell.
Oh, well. Did you watch the one that... I think I sent you a link to it, the one with Tom Sizemore. The third Asylum War of the Worlds movie.
I scrubbed through it quickly.
I felt... I simultaneously felt sorry for Tom Sizemore, and on the other hand thought, good luck, mate, you're getting paid to stand there half asleep and just trot these lines out. But I think he was dead 6 months later, wasn't he? Bless him. I think he's dead now, Tom Sizemore.
The best moment, though, out of all those films is in the C. Thomas Howell version, where the crater is formed, and the woman turns to C. Thomas Howell and says, "What smells like ass?"
Oh, incredible. But since we last even talked about War of the Worlds, because I'd mentioned at the time that there was a really low-budget British one, and that maybe we should have a go at doing like a commentary track for it, but I watched it and there was just nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about at all. But since then, there's been the Amazon War of the
Ice Cube.
film.
The Ice Cube.
Oh, have you seen it?
No, I have not.
Oh, mate. Oh. You know what? It's a ride. It's fucking terrible, but it is an amusing ride.
I don't know why no one can adopt that story. It's so adaptable. They fail every time. It's figuring Senor Spielbergo is the only one who's even made a half-decent effort at it.
Yeah, I think they made that one during COVID and it went on a shelf for ages. So It's plainly obvious everybody's doing it in their sauna, their bedroom, their garage, whatever. They're just filming this crap wherever they happen to be at any time. Occasionally someone will creep out and do it in a car.
The pandemic movie, It
is fucking bad. But what really tips it over the edge into just obscenely cynical terribleness by the end is that one of the things that helps us defeat the aliens in the end is Amazon deliveries.
Oh.
Seriously. Oh. Amazon drone deliveries.
That's so 2025.
And there's this bit where the drone, or whatever it is, falls on its side and can't right itself. and they can see through its camera that there's a homeless man about 10 feet away. So they've hacked Amazon so they can do this, right? Because there's Ice Cube's son is a mega hacker, right? So they've hacked Amazon in order to get this Amazon delivery drone to do what they need it to do. It's come a cropper 10 feet from a homeless man. So they message the homeless man on his phone and say, if you turn that drone over, we'll give you $1,000 in Amazon vouchers. And he,
I think I'm going to throw up.
And he looks at his phone and goes, oh. And goes and wrecks the drone.
No,
so there's two things there. One is it's the worst thing you've ever seen.
Oh,
the other
product placement. Oh.
The other is they've hacked Amazon, and they only give the homeless man $1,000.
Was this directed by Jeff Bezos by any chance?
Fucking hell! It's the most spectacularly terrible sack of shit you will ever see in your life. But it's worth watching just for all of Ice Cube's variety in what the fuck faces as he's staring straight down the camera as if he's staring at his laptop
What's
screen.
happening, motherfucker?
It's just, it's absolutely amazing. It's amazing.
All right, you've almost convinced me.
I watched it last summer when I was off sick, and I was fed up. I was off sick. I had my feet up, and I don't know where Phil was. I just thought, I've heard this is terrible. I'm going to watch it. And I'll be honest, for probably 80 of the 90 minutes, I was just chuckling to myself at how ridiculous it all was. I mean, even the Amazon gift card to the homeless man bit was just this is just too much.
There is a value to it, just so bad it's good, I suppose.
Yeah, but in terms of will anybody ever do an actual decent, faithful recreation of War of the Worlds? Probably not. Probably not. Interestingly, though, on that score, last night we watched a dumb as fuck action film called War Machine, which has just popped up on Netflix. So there's this new action hero guy. He plays Jack Reacher in the TV series of Jack Reacher, and he's big, big, handsome, buff, can't act to save his life, but he's big and he's handsome and he's buff and he can do an action role. And it's about a group of ranger trainees who go into the mountains somewhere in America to do an exercise. And while they're out there, listen to this, some kind of meteorite lands and they find it, and a biped war machine emerges from it and starts chasing them around the countryside and murdering them all.
Very original.
Yeah, and then by the end, he makes it back to HQ, and these biped war machines in meteorites have landed all over the world.
Shocking.
And it's called War Machine. So it's basically, it's a War of the Worlds knockoff itself.
That probably
reduced
had a budget of $10 million to make that shit.
Oh, probably more than that. The special effects in it are actually quite good.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, but so people are still knocking out, loose War of the Worlds knockoffs and adaptations, and that's just another one. But, it's better than the Ice Cube one, to be fair. Anyway, back to Birch and Jay. So, yes, we do have our moments of thrill and violence and heads exploding like a pumpkin, which was great. I really enjoyed that. But I tell you, I've got a beef with this book.
Okay.
And my one beef with this book is it's episode 1, and it feels like episode 1, and now I need episode 2 because we get our experience of Toronto at the end, and we get the daring rescue, but it then stops.
Indeed.
And I want book 2, damn it.
Well, I have an agreement in place for book 2 to come out in spring 2027, which admittedly is a year away, but not bad in publishing industry terms, 2 years apart. And as I told you off the top, I have written it. My wife is currently looking for my Achilles heel, which is missing words, and missing A's and N's, because I'm a fast writer. And I'm very, very happy with it. If anything, it's darker than the first. But the first one isn't really that dark when it comes down to it when you compare it to other things, really. I shouldn't oversell the darkness.
It isn't. We were talking earlier on about, nihilistic post-apocalyptic stuff and more hopeful post-apocalyptic stuff. And this very much sits firmly in the more hopeful end of things. Like the Station 11 end of things, where, that there are horrible things are happening and there are horrible people around, but our protagonists and the people who they're with see a better view of the world and are pursuing a better view of the world that you as the reader can identify with.
Yeah, so in the sequel there is a plot that resolves what's going to happen, what's happening in the first book, and the theme of it is violence itself, the choice of non-violent resistance or taking up arms. That's the
Yeah.
moral debate. The other half is a flashback to the collapse or the ruin, as my characters call it. So I can show you how those people came to found this community and the things that they went through. And by the time this book comes out, God knows what will actually exist that to mirror or even better what I've written. But yeah, the sequel is I titled it, and I'm pretty good at titling things, so I'm hoping it'll stay. It's called Cedar in the Storm is the title.
Yeah, well, I'll look forward to that. So you said that you were, and I hope Khaled gets kicked in the nuts.
Well, he'll be in the book. Don't worry, something will happen.
Yeah, yeah. And I hope Malik's all right as well.
Well, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, no spoilers, everybody. But I hope Malik's all right. I'll tell you something else when I was reading this. This would make, I don't know if you're a gamer, but this would make an excellent open world RPG type game. You know,
No, when you write something and people enjoy it, they always say to you, "This will make a great game. This is a great movie." And you say, "Well, duh." We'll just tell Steven Soderbergh to give me a call. I'm ready. Just make me the music supervisor. Because I don't want any Olivia Rodrigo turning up in my post-apocalyptic movie.
Yeah. I really think it was. You've got like built-in, great NPCs. I love the idea of cycling around ruined Ontario.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. Yeah. So you mentioned that you've got other things on the back burner as well. Any hints on what they may be?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of them I'm about 30,000 words into, which means it's so far in that I know I'll finish it. Yeah. It's a riff on the Stranger in a Strange Land / Vornan 19 premise of the visitor from the future or possibly another planet. We don't know. We won't know until the end of the book. Being dropped into Earth, but I've chosen 1938 Canada. So it's very specifically what's going on in the world at that time. So the Second World War is about to start, and here's this futuristic guy dropped in. He's going to have encounters with politicians and scientists and religious people, and the Nazis are going to hear about him. So it's more of a sort of a romp. There'll be some, there's some implied moral content. But it's allowing me to write in the voice of characters of that period, which I'm really enjoying. I can put some of my, historical fiction knowledge to work.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I've got going on is a really classic style science fiction story about settlement of an exoplanet. And the theme of that book, very specifically, is isolation and loneliness and exploration. So very classic science fiction themes, and I wanted to have a go at that. And so that's something that fans of sort of classic 60s science fiction, I think, would really enjoy.
So you're on a major fucking tear, aren't you, really? Because how long ago did you write the music of the Spheres?
Well, the original, right? 1999.
Yeah, so, 1999, and then fast forward to the 2020s, and you've got one published, you've got another one potentially published 2 years later, and you've got two more in the offing.
Well, once you develop a habit and you sort of a confidence to know that you can do something, that's when you can really get going. All those years I thought, well, the music of the Spheres is terrible. Nobody told me that. I just thought so. I internalized that. And then once I started writing again, I thought, well, I'm not saying I'm a literary genius, but clearly I can do this. I can create an entertaining and meaningful story. And once I had that confidence, then, it's off to the races and has replaced music to some degree as my main sort of hobby, I would say.
Right, so no more new music for the time being then? Or are you still
just
sneaking
sort
some
of,
out?
I'm doing like little ambient things that are often just remixes of older things, or and people seem to be enjoying them. But I mean, I'm not writing sort of bigger, more ambitious music while I'm doing this. There's only so many hours in the day for hobbies, as everyone knows.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, I remember years ago when I was. Every few years, I try really hard to write some short stories or something, and I get so far, and then I lose interest and drift off to something else. And funnily enough, at the moment, some of the patrons and I are putting together short stories, and we're going to put out, when we get round to it, we're going to put out, self-publish a book of short stories. And that should be quite good fun, actually. Just like 6,000 to 8,000 page short stories, just for the crack.
If you need a copy editor who'll give you a sweet friends and family deal, you know who to talk to.
I would fear your judgment.
My judgment. I'm very encouraging. I'm renowned for being encouraging.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll store that up.
Okay.
But I remember years and years and years ago when I first worked with a friend of mine, and she's a writer, you know, and she I think we just write to entertain ourselves and occasionally each other, you know. And I remember at the time, I can't remember where, I read an interview with Sterling Siliphant, who wrote things like the Poseidon Adventure and the Batman TV show in the 60s and various other things. And he said the secret to writing is to never stop writing. And I always think about that and think, because occasionally when the mood hits me, I will get on a tear and I'll get cracking. And it feels like as long as you keep doing it...
Well, that's the problem.
It's like
right
a muscle.
There. It's about habit, though.
Yeah.
Because if you just do it when the mood takes you, the mood might only take you every 6 months. But if you say, I'm going to take an hour a week, and it's not going to be tacked on at 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be somewhere in the day where I'm alert, like maybe Saturday morning or something. If you show that discipline, then the results really start to come in. Like, I'm a fast writer, so I would sit down, a couple hours later, I'd have 5,000 words that would need shaping. But you can write a book pretty fast that way when you actually have the discipline to do it. And I haven't really of late. The progress I made on those books, those novels, I should say, I made up until about the end of the year, and then I started revising the sequel, and so I need to get back to the habit that I had developed. But it is all about repetition.
Yeah. Oh, all my habits are bad, and I have zero self-discipline.
Well, you managed to record lots and lots of this podcast, so you got some discipline.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I think this will be episode 133 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, that takes some ambition.
Yeah. But on the other hand, doing podcasts just means I sit here with a cherry and chocolate stout at 5.5% and yak with people that I enjoy talking to. That doesn't feel like I need discipline to do it. It just feels like I enjoy doing it, therefore I'll do it.
That means it's work you love. That's all it means.
This is true, and I do love it. And I loved having you back. So thanks again for coming back to tell us about this, and we'll look forward to whatever comes next. But also, what we won't do is wait another 18 months to get you back on. We will formulate a plan.
You know, I can talk about most things, so let's do it.
Well, next month, in the next few weeks, I'll be putting out our Warlord of the Air Part 2 episode and recording Warlord of the Air Part 3. And then, at some point, I'll be thinking about doing... Is it the Steel Tsar or the Land Leviathan after that one?
The Land Leviathan is the second.
Land Leviathan. So if you want to pin your name to the Land Leviathan, you're more than welcome.
That was the one that changed my life in significant ways, so, yes.
Well, how very apt. We shall pursue that then. All right, Alistair, thanks again. See you next time.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Allister for returning to Derry Toms. Birch and Jay is easily available in North America at the moment, and supplies are starting to trickle to Europe, so watch this space. The music of the Spheres is readily available, and Allister's music can be found on Bandcamp, Spotify, and other places under the names The Gateless Gate, Carn Tengri, Sons of Birches, and his own regular human name too. But on Bandcamp, it's all at thegatelessgate.bandcamp.com. And, as it happens, Allister has a tie-in album called Birch and Jay, and I'll play this episode out with a track from it. And as it happens, that song actually occurs in the novel being performed by one of the characters. Allister will be back soon, as will I when I talk to another friend of the show, Jason Atomic, about his work on a recent publication, so watch out for that in short order. But in the meantime, thanks as ever to our glorious patrons, those without tier, Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster and Sebastian Weetabix, our chaos engineers, Andrew Clark, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave F., Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner-Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Rex Osseous Nusquam, Roger McCarthy, Scott Butler, Simon Perrins, Steve Braun and Steve Luke, And thanks to our crafty jugaderos Ed von Stort, Adrian Tchaikovsky, Alexander Harris, Andrew Van Ness, Kathy Rhubarb, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, James Connell, Graham Holden, James Knight, Kevin Williams, Liam Turner, Lone Hugo, Loz, Mark Buckley, Mark Hewlett, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Nick Hopkinson, Arthur Ziv, Ritz B. Skits, Sean Twist, Toby White and Taylor Lavery. And eternal thanks to our patron demons, Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andy Darby, Brian Henderson, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Janie Stim, Jason Vogel, Jem Gilbert, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hiarper, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Liam Jones, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tone Malazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but never least, Robert McMillan. Enough of my gabbing. You can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky with the handle at Breakfast Ruins. You can email us, breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. We've got our Patreon page too, of course, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But until next time, wherever you are in the world, whatever's going on in your corner of that world, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.
Sure, when we were young, we could still see the sky, watching countless stars glow above, and beautiful birds still flying. I stood there with her, hand in hand. She gave herself to me. The world was ours, no end in sight, as far as we could see. But the sky was poison, the seas were plastic, the ice melted away, and the time finally came when we knew that we just couldn't stay. A long march in search of shelter and food, we starved along the way. Some stumbled and cried and fell down and died every single day. Why did we do it? Why wouldn't we listen to the wise one? Why could we not change? Living on trash, the detritus of the den, finding whatever we could. We cursed ourselves and our kind for not doing what we should. But still I had her to light my hope. Happiness could be found till her strength gave out and she died and was left abandoned on the ground. Now I stand old and tired by a dead brown shoal sea, and I wait for the mercy of death to claim what's left of me. One of the last of a ruined species that destroyed this whole earth, that raped and cut and bruised and finally killed the place of our birth. Why did we do it? Why wouldn't we listen to the wise one? Why